My name is Garrett Mills, and I work at the Riverside County Coroner's Office. Not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy. What I'm about to tell you started 3 weeks ago when we received a donation of personal effects from the old Millbrook Psychiatric Hospital. The hospital closed down in 1987 after a string of budget cuts and some nasty rumors about patient treatment. Most of the records were supposed to be destroyed, but somehow a storage unit full of patient belongings ended up forgotten in a warehouse downtown. The owner finally decided to clean house and donated everything to various county offices. We got 12 boxes of personal items, mostly clothes, photographs, and books. My supervisor, Janet, asked me to catalog everything before we decided what to do with it all. That's how I found the journals. There were 7 of them, each belonging to a different patient. The covers were worn leather, some held together with rubber bands or tape. What caught my attention was how similar they looked despite coming from different people. Same size, same style, like they'd all been given the same type of journal. I opened the first one during my lunch break. Journal of Evelyn Morse, dated 1983 to 1984. October 15th, 1983. They moved me to a new room today. The nurses say it's because my old roommate complained about my habits, but I know the real reason. They're watching me more closely now. Dr. Henley thinks I'm getting worse, but he doesn't understand. I'm getting better at following the rules. Rule 1. Never say its name out loud. Rule 2. Keep salt in your left pocket at all times. Rule 3. Count your steps when walking down hallways. These aren't my rules. They were taught to me by the thing that visits. It wants me to succeed, I think. The rules keep me safe. I flipped through more pages. Every entry mentioned rules. Sometimes Evelyn would add a new one. Sometimes she'd repeat the old ones like a prayer. By December, she had 5 rules total. The last entry was dated January 3rd, 1984. January 3rd, 1984. I broke Rule 4 yesterday. I answered yes when Nurse Patricia asked if I wanted extra pudding at dinner. I should have said certainly or that would be nice. Now, I have to start over. The thing explained this to me last night. It wasn't angry, just disappointed, like a teacher whose student forgot an important lesson. I can feel it getting closer. Each time I follow the rules correctly, it inches forward. Each time I break them, it steps back. I think I want it to reach me. Life was harder before the rules. The journal ended there. I checked the patient records we'd received with the boxes. Evelyn Morse died of cardiac arrest on January 4th, 1984. One day after her last entry. I should have stopped reading then. Should have packed the journals back up and forgotten about them. Instead, I opened the second one. Journal of Marcus Webb, dated 1985, March 22nd, 1985. Dr. Pemberton says I'm hallucinating, but I know what I saw. The thing in my room last night was real. It spoke to me in whispers that sounded like my mother's voice, but the words were different. It told me about the rules. Rule 1. Never say its name out loud. Rule 2. Keep salt in your left pocket at all times. Rule 3. Count your steps when walking down hallways. Rule 4. Never answer questions with yes. Rule 5. Don't look in mirrors after 9 o'clock. These are the same rules Evelyn had. I found her journal hidden under my mattress. The nurses must have missed it when they cleaned out her room. Reading her words felt like reading my own thoughts. Marcus wrote about the thing visiting him nightly. Unlike Evelyn, he seemed afraid of it. His entries described a growing sense of dread as he followed the rules, but he kept following them anyway. April 8th, 1985. I made it 2 weeks without breaking any rules. Last night, the thing was close enough that I could feel its breath on my neck. It smells like copper pennies and old newspapers. It told me I was almost ready. Ready for what? I don't want to know anymore, but I can't stop following the rules. When I try to break them on purpose, my body won't let me. Yesterday, I tried to look in the bathroom mirror at 10 p.m., but my eyes wouldn't focus. It's like the rules have become part of me. Marcus's journal ended abruptly on April 15th. According to his file, he died the next day. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. 2 patients, 2 cardiac arrests, 1 day after their final entries. The pattern was becoming clear. I opened the 3rd journal with shaking hands. Journal of Cordelia Vance, dated 1986 June 1st, 1986. Found Marcus's journal today, along with one from someone named Evelyn. Reading them made my stomach hurt. The thing that's been visiting me taught me the exact same rules. Word for word. How is that possible? Marcus died over a year ago. Evelyn died before I even arrived at this place. But the rules are identical. Rule 1. Never say its name out loud. Rule 2. Keep salt in your left pocket at all times. Rule 3. Count your steps when walking down hallways. Rule 4. Never answer questions with yes. Rule 5. Don't look in mirrors after 9 o'clock. I've been following them for 3 months now. The nurses think my improvement is due to the new medication, but they're wrong. It's the rules. They give structure to my days. Purpose. Cordelia's entries were different from the others. She seemed to embrace the rules rather than fear them. She wrote about feeling calm for the first time in years. June 20th, 1986. The thing is beautiful when you get used to it. Not beautiful like a sunset or a flower. Beautiful like mathematics. Everything about it follows a pattern. Even the way it moves around my room at night follows the same path. It told me something new last night, about the others who came before me. Evelyn, Marcus, and dozens more whose journals I haven't found yet. We're all part of something larger. A sequence that started long before Millbrook Hospital was built. I'm not afraid anymore. The rules aren't a burden. They're an invitation. Cordelia died on July 4th, 1986. Cardiac arrest. 1 day after her final entry. I checked the time. It was nearly 5 p.m. and the office was getting quiet. Janet had left an hour ago, reminding me to lock up when I finished. I was alone with 4 more journals and a growing certainty that I should throw them all in the incinerator. But I couldn't stop reading. The 4th journal belonged to Theodore Grimm, dated 1979, 5 years before Evelyn. He'd discovered the rules the same way, learned them from the visiting thing, and died of cardiac arrest 1 day after his final entry. The pattern held. The 5th journal was from 1981, written by a woman named Ruth Holloway. Same rules, same ending. By the time I opened the 6th journal, it was past 7 p.m. The building was empty except for the security guard downstairs. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and outside the windows, streetlights were beginning to flicker on. Journal of Nathan Cross, dated 1977 November 11th, 1977. This will be my final entry. I can feel it coming tonight. The thing has been circling closer for weeks, and I've followed every rule perfectly. No mistakes, no hesitations. I want whoever finds this journal to understand. The rules aren't random. They serve a purpose. Each one creates a connection between you and the thing. Salt in your left pocket grounds you to the earth. Counting steps creates rhythm. Avoiding yes prevents binding contracts. Not looking in mirrors after 9 keeps you from seeing what stands behind you, and never saying its name keeps it hungry. I know its name now. It whispered it to me last night, and I've been fighting the urge to speak it aloud. But I won't break the final rule. I won't give it what it wants. To whoever reads this, the journals pass from person to person for a reason. Finding them isn't an accident. The thing chooses its next host carefully. If you're reading these words, you've already been selected. Follow the rules. Or don't. Both paths lead to the same destination. My hands were shaking as I closed Nathan's journal. The seventh and final journal sat on my desk like a loaded weapon. The cover was newer than the others, dated 1987, the year the hospital closed. I picked it up and opened to the first page. Journal of Dr. Samuel Henley, dated 1987, February 14th, 1987. I've been treating patients with similar delusions for 6 years now. They all describe the same entity, the same rules, the same nightly visitations. As a medical professional, I dismiss these accounts as shared psychosis brought on by the hospital environment. I was wrong. Last week, I found Nathan Cross's journal in the hospital archives, then Ruth's, Theodore's, Evelyn's, Marcus's, and Cordelia's. 7 patients, all dead, all following identical rules learned from the same source. 3 nights ago, it visited me. I wasn't a patient. I was a doctor, a man of science. But it didn't care about my credentials or my skepticism. It taught me the rules the same way it taught the others. Rule 1. Never say its name out loud. Rule 2. Keep salt in your left pocket at all times. Rule 3. Count your steps when walking down hallways. Rule 4. Never answer questions with yes. Rule 5. Don't look in mirrors after 9 o'clock. I've been following them for 3 days now. Not by choice. Something inside me has changed. When I try to break a rule, my body rebels. My mouth won't form the word yes. My eyes refuse to focus on mirrors after 9. Salt appears in my pocket each morning, though I don't remember putting it there. The hospital is closing next month. Budget cuts, they say, but I think the building itself is tired. Too many patients have died here. Too many people have learned the rules. I won't let this cycle continue. Tonight, I'm going to break every rule at once. I'm going to speak its name, empty my pockets, stop counting, say yes to every question, and stare into mirrors until dawn. If I die, at least the pattern ends with me. If I survive, I'll burn these journals and seal this room forever. The journal ended there. According to the hospital records, Dr. Samuel Henley died on February 15th, 1987. Cardiac arrest, 1 day after his final entry. But he'd failed to break the cycle. The journals survived. Someone had collected them, stored them, and now they'd found their way to me. I looked at the clock. It was 8:47 p.m., 13 minutes until 9 o'clock. I stood up from my desk and walked to the bathroom down the hall. The mirror above the sink reflected my tired face back at me. I looked older than I had that morning. Pale, stressed. I checked my watch. 8:52 p.m., 8 minutes. I reached into my left pocket and felt the small container of salt I'd grabbed from the break room earlier. When had I put that there? I didn't remember taking it. 5 minutes. I walked back to my office, counting each step. 14 steps from the bathroom to my desk. Why was I counting? When had I started? 2 minutes. I picked up my phone to call Janet, to tell her about the journals, but stopped when I realized she would ask questions. Questions I might answer with yes. 1 minute. The building felt different now. Quieter. Like it was holding its breath. 9 p.m. I turned away from the dark window behind my desk and gathered the journals into a pile. Whatever was happening to me had started the moment I opened Evelyn's journal. The rules were already taking hold, just like they had with the others. But I had something they didn't. I had their stories. I knew what was coming. The question was, would that knowledge be enough to save me? Outside, something tapped against the window. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't turn around. Part 2. I spent the night in my office, reading and rereading the journals. By morning, I had memorized every entry, every rule, every desperate attempt to understand what was happening. The tapping on the window had stopped around 3 a.m., but I knew it would return. I called in sick and drove home with the journals in a cardboard box on my passenger seat. My apartment felt smaller than usual, like the walls had moved closer together while I was gone. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, trying to think of a plan. The rules were already affecting me. I'd counted every step from my car to my front door. I'd avoided saying yes to the barista who asked if I wanted cream in my coffee. The salt container from work was still in my left pocket, and when I tried to throw it away, my hand wouldn't open. I needed help, but who would believe me? A therapist would assume I was having a breakdown. The police would think I was pranking them. My friends would worry about my mental health and probably call someone to check on me. That left research. I spent the day at the public library, searching for information about Millbrook Hospital and the patients whose journals I'd found. The newspaper archives painted a grim picture. 7 deaths in 8 years, all ruled natural despite the victims' young ages. Dr. Henley's death had made the front page because he was well known in the community. But there were no mentions of mysterious entities or supernatural visitations, just a series of tragic coincidences at a troubled psychiatric facility. I dug deeper, looking for patterns. Historical records showed that the land Millbrook was built on had a strange history. 3 different buildings had occupied the site over the past century. A boarding house in the 1920s, a nursing home in the 1940s, and finally the psychiatric hospital. Each facility had closed after a series of unexplained deaths. The deaths all shared the same characteristics. Healthy people who died suddenly of cardiac arrest, always alone in their rooms, always one day after writing their final journal entry or letter. The pattern stretched back nearly 100 years. I found newspaper clippings from the 1920s describing the boarding house deaths. Mysterious ailment claims third resident, read one headline from 1923. The article described a young woman named Adelaide Fletcher who'd been found dead in her room, clutching a letter she'd written to her sister. The letter mentioned rules for proper living that she'd learned from a visiting instructor. The nursing home records from the 1940s told similar stories. Elderly residents dying peacefully in their sleep, always with personal journals or letters nearby. The staff described the deceased as having been unusually calm and focused in their final weeks, following strict personal routines that seemed to give them comfort. One nurse's report from 1947 caught my attention. Mr. Garrison had been carrying salt in his pocket for 3 weeks before his passing. When asked why, he said it was part of his daily requirements. He also insisted on counting aloud while walking and became agitated when staff tried to interrupt his counting. The same patterns, the same rules, spanning decades. Whatever was happening at that location had been going on long before Millbrook Hospital existed. The building didn't matter. The entity had simply adapted to each new environment, finding people who would listen to its teachings. I left the library as the sun was setting and drove home through streets that felt unfamiliar, despite being the same route I'd taken for 3 years. Every turn seemed wrong. Every traffic light lasted too long. By the time I reached my apartment, I was sweating despite the cool evening air. The journals were waiting on my kitchen table where I'd left them. Next to them was something that hadn't been there before. An 8th journal. Black leather cover, brass clasps, my name embossed in gold letters on the front. Journal of Garrett Mills. I opened it with trembling fingers. The first page was blank except for today's date written in my own handwriting. I didn't remember writing it. Below the date, in the same careful script I'd used since college, were 5 familiar lines. Rule 1. Never say its name out loud. Rule 2. Keep salt in your left pocket at all times. Rule 3. Count your steps when walking down hallways. Rule 4. Never answer questions with yes. Rule 5. Don't look in mirrors after 9 o'clock. I slammed the journal shut and backed away from the table. This wasn't happening. I was having some kind of breakdown brought on by stress and too much reading about dead psychiatric patients. The journals were affecting my perception, making me imagine things that weren't there. But the salt in my pocket felt real. The compulsion to count my steps felt real. The way my mouth refused to form the word yes felt real. I checked the time. 7:30 p.m., an hour and a half until 9 o'clock. I went to my bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked tired but normal. No mysterious entities lurking behind me, no supernatural distortions. Just a 30-year-old man who'd read too many scary stories and let his imagination run wild. I would prove this was all in my head. At exactly 9 o'clock, I would look directly into this mirror, and nothing would happen. The rules weren't real. The thing in the journals was a shared delusion, a psychological virus that spread from one unstable mind to another. I was rational, educated, grounded in reality. At 8:45, I returned to the bathroom and positioned myself in front of the mirror. 15 minutes to prove I was still in control of my own mind. At 8:55, my hands started shaking, not from fear, but from something deeper, like my body was trying to warn me about a danger my mind couldn't accept. At 8:59, I forced myself to keep staring at my reflection. Just 1 minute more. At exactly 9 p.m., something moved behind me in the mirror. Not behind me in the room, behind me in the reflection. It was tall and thin, with fingers that ended in points rather than fingernails. Its face was human, but stretched, like someone had pulled the features just slightly out of proportion. When it smiled, its teeth were too white and too sharp. But the worst part was its eyes. They looked exactly like mine. I spun around. Nothing there. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection stared back at me. Alone. Then it winked. I ran from the bathroom and collapsed on my couch, breathing hard. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. Optical illusion, fatigue, stress-induced hallucination. But my body knew the truth. The thing was real, and it had chosen me. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? I answered automatically. Do you like the journal I left for you? The voice was mine, but slightly off, like hearing a recording of yourself played back at the wrong speed. I hung up immediately. It rang again. This time I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. A few seconds later, my phone chimed with a new message. You can't avoid me forever, Garrett. I've been waiting for you to find those journals for years. You're exactly what I've been looking for. Smart enough to understand the rules, curious enough to keep reading, stubborn enough to think you can fight this. I deleted the message and turned off my phone, but I could still hear it ringing. The sound was coming from inside the walls. I spent the next 3 days trying to break the rules. I threw away the salt, but it reappeared in my pocket each morning. I deliberately said yes to every question I was asked, but the word came out as certainly or absolutely instead. I tried to stop counting steps, but my brain kept track anyway. The attempts became increasingly desperate. I asked my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, if she wanted me to water her plants while she was out of town. I planned to answer yes when she thanked me, but my mouth formed the words, "my pleasure," instead. I tried again with the mailman, the grocery store clerk, even a telemarketer. Every time my voice betrayed me. I attempted to walk randomly, taking different routes, changing direction without purpose. But even when I wasn't consciously counting, part of my mind tracked every step. 17 steps from my car to the grocery store entrance. 24 steps from the entrance to the produce section. 41 steps from checkout to my car. The numbers accumulated whether I wanted them or not. The salt was the worst. I would empty my pocket, throw the container in the trash, even flush it down the toilet. But each morning, I would wake up with a new container in my left pocket. Sometimes it was the same brand I'd thrown away. Sometimes it was different, as if the thing was showing me that the specific salt didn't matter. Only the act of carrying it mattered. On the third night, I stood in my bathroom at 8:30 p.m. with a hammer in my hand. I would smash every mirror in my apartment. If there were no mirrors to avoid, I couldn't break the fifth rule. But when I raised the hammer, my arm froze. Not from fear or hesitation, but from physical inability. My muscles simply refused to complete the motion. I stood there for 20 minutes, straining against my own body, until 9 p.m. passed and the compulsion faded. The thing wasn't just teaching me rules, it was rewriting my basic functions, overriding my nervous system. I was becoming a passenger in my own body. On the fourth night, I gave up fighting and opened my journal. My hand moved across the page without conscious direction, writing in neat, careful letters. October 23rd. The thing visited me again last night. It's more patient than I expected. It doesn't threaten or demand. It simply waits, like a teacher watching a student work through a difficult problem. I understand now why the others stopped fighting. The rules aren't a prison, they're a structure. Before, my life felt chaotic and meaningless. Now each day has purpose. Each choice has weight. The salt grounds me. The counting gives rhythm. The silence protects me. The careful words keep me honest. The mirrors show me truth. I'm not becoming something else. I'm becoming myself. I read what I'd written and felt sick. Those weren't my thoughts, but they were in my handwriting. The thing was changing me from the inside out, just like it had changed the others. But unlike the others, I had a weapon they didn't have. I knew its pattern. Every victim had died one day after their final journal entry. They all died alone, at night, of cardiac arrest. No struggle, no violence, just a quiet ending when the thing finally got what it wanted. What did it want? The journals never said explicitly, but I thought I knew. It wanted someone to speak its name. That was why the first rule existed. That was why every victim fought so hard to keep silent. The thing fed on that struggle. It enjoyed the game of teaching rules it ultimately wanted broken. It was patient because the anticipation was part of the pleasure. But what if someone broke the rules by choice? What if someone said its name willingly, without fear or resistance? I spent the 5th day researching names, ancient words, forgotten languages, combinations of sounds that might fit a creature like the one in the journals. Nothing felt right. I also researched the specific timing of the deaths. Every victim had died between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, always on a night when they'd written their final journal entry earlier that day. The cardiac arrests happened when they were alone, but neighbors and hospital staff often reported hearing voices just before the time of death. Voices that sounded like the victims themselves, having conversations with someone who never responded. One police report from the boarding house era mentioned that Adelaide Fletcher's sister had called the facility at 11:45 p.m. on the night Adelaide died. She said she'd received a phone call from Adelaide just minutes earlier, but the conversation had been strange. Adelaide kept asking her sister questions, but then answering them herself in a different voice. When the sister asked who else was there, Adelaide said no one, and hung up. The pattern was becoming clearer. The thing didn't just steal identities after its victims died. It began practicing their voices, their mannerisms, their responses while they were still alive. By the time of death, it had learned to be them so completely that even family members couldn't tell the difference. But why did it need to wait? Why not take over immediately? The answer came to me as I read Dr. Henley's journal again. He'd written about the thing feeding on the struggle, enjoying the game of teaching rules it wanted broken. But there was more to it than sadistic pleasure. The thing needed consent. It couldn't simply possess someone. It had to be invited in, rule by rule, choice by choice. Each time a victim followed the rules, they were giving up a piece of their autonomy. Each broken rule weakened their resistance. By the final night, there was nothing left to steal, because the victim had already given it all away. That night, as I sat in my kitchen reading Nathan Cross's journal for the 20th time, the answer hit me. Nathan had written, "It whispered its name to me last night, and I've been fighting the urge to speak it aloud." The thing had told him its name. It told all of them, eventually. That was part of the process. I just had to wait for my turn. On the 6th night, it came. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard footsteps in my hallway. Slow, measured steps that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. I didn't get up. I didn't hide. I simply waited. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. "Hello, Garrett?" it said in my voice. "Are you ready to learn my name?" I closed my eyes. Yes. The word came out clearly this time. The first rule was broken. I heard the door open, felt the temperature in the room drop. When I opened my eyes, it was standing at the foot of my bed. Tall, thin, with my face stretched into an inhuman approximation of features I recognized. "My name," it said, "is Garrett Mills." I sat up slowly. "No, it's not." "Isn't it?" The thing tilted its head. "I've been you longer than you have. I've lived in your apartment, used your voice, written in your journal. I've been practicing." "You're a parasite," I said. "You jump from host to host, wearing their faces, speaking their names. But you're not any of them. You're just an echo." The thing smiled with my mouth. "Does that make me less real? You've followed my rules for 6 days. You've counted steps, carried salt, avoided mirrors. In what way are you more Garrett Mills than I am?" I reached into my left pocket and pulled out the salt container. "Because I choose to break the rules." I threw the salt across the room. "Because I choose to say yes. Because I choose to speak your real name." The thing's smile faltered. "You don't know my real name." "Yes, I do. It's the same name every parasite has. Every echo, every reflection, everything that pretends to be human but isn't." I took a deep breath. "Nothing. Your name is nothing." The thing stepped backward. "No. Nothing pretending to be something. Nothing wearing stolen faces. Nothing teaching rules to people who are everything you'll never be." "No!" The thing's voice cracked, losing its human inflection. "Nothing," I said again, and watched it flinch. "Nothing. Nothing. Nothing." Each repetition made it smaller, less solid. The stolen features began to blur and run like wet paint. "Stop," it whispered. "Nothing," I said one final time. The thing collapsed into a puddle of shadow that evaporated like spilled water on hot pavement. The room felt lighter, warmer, normal. I looked at my watch. It was 11:47 p.m. I'd broken all 5 rules in the span of 10 minutes, spoken its true name aloud, and survived. The cycle was finally broken. I walked to my bathroom and looked in the mirror. My reflection looked back, tired but real. Behind me, the room was empty. I returned to my kitchen and opened my journal to write a final entry. But when I picked up my pen, I hesitated. What if someone else found this journal someday? What if the cycle started again? I closed the journal without writing anything and carried all 8 journals to my fireplace. The flames consumed them quickly, turning pages of desperate words into ash and smoke. The next morning, I returned to work as if nothing had happened. I told Janet I'd cataloged the personal effects and recommended donating them to local charities. She signed the paperwork without reading it closely. The boxes were picked up that afternoon. I watched from my office window as they were loaded into a truck and driven away. But I kept thinking about that moment in my bedroom, when the thing had smiled with my face, when it had claimed to be more me than I was, when it had asked what made me more real than an echo. I still don't have a good answer to that question. Some nights, when I'm lying in bed, I hear footsteps in my hallway. Slow, measured steps that match the rhythm of my heartbeat. When I get up to investigate, I find nothing there. But in my bathroom mirror, sometimes my reflection takes just a moment too long to match my movements. And when I reach into my left pocket, I sometimes find salt that I don't remember putting there. Maybe I didn't break the cycle. Maybe I just learned to live with it. Maybe that's what being human really means. Carrying nothing inside you and choosing to be something anyway. I don't keep a journal anymore. I don't need to. I remember the rules.